was open.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us and see us. We should be starting momentarily. We're back after, we're back live on YouTube after a few weeks off. There just wasn't much to talk about. And then there was everything to talk about. And so that's why we're back. And also it's a monumental day for Windows, being that it's 40 years since Windows 1.0 was released, which is insane. Dan can tell us his earliest memories of Windows 1.0.
Thanks. Not that old.
All right, I'm ready to start when you are.
Yeah, just like I gotta do the tweets and stuff.
Okay, no worries. Where has the time gone? Where has the time gone? So, is Windows the oldest? No, I mean, how old's Linux? When was Linux released? Oh, actually, according to Wikipedia, 1991. So Windows is older than Linux. Hey, what about Unix? There we go. That makes more sense. 1971. So Unix is a lot older than Windows. When was the first Mac OS? Mac OS was before Windows, right?
Mac OS?
Yeah, wasn't it 1975?
Before Windows? I don't think so. Maybe.
What am I thinking was released in 1975? Am I just making up that year for no reason? Oh, was that when Microsoft started? Maybe, I can't remember.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just give me 1 second.
I found an article that only lists up to Mac OS 10. Why would you not go further than that? The original Macintosh, 1984. Okay, it's a year older. Oh, yes, of course, because that's where all the claims that Windows copied Mac came from, which is probably fair.
Oh, yeah, I gotta break my voice recorder. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. There's some background noise you may hear. I can't do anything about it. I think it's my neighbors.
I'm gonna record the call as well, because if the audio is bad, we'll just use the audio here, because I can't hear any background noise.
I don't think it's too bad. It just sounds like some background. Okay, I'm now recording.
I'm now recording.
3, 2, 1, clap. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 385 for November 20th, 2025. Hey everyone, Gina Rubino here, joined with Zac Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. This week, we got a bunch of things to talk about, including the 40th anniversary of Windows, which is a pretty big deal. But the bigger deal is, what will the next 40 years look like? Which, I have a lot of dark, cynical things there to think about. But we also, Microsoft reveals how Windows is evolving into an agentic OS, as well as the backlash from that statement and revelation. We'll also talk about some other Ignite news, because Ignite did happen this week, and Microsoft had a bunch of announcements there. We missed last week, or at least I did, but Zac did a podcast, but we didn't get to talk about Valve's Steam machine and how it's going to potentially impact Xbox and Sony, we should mention, and just PC gaming in general. And then finally, Qualcomm had some pretty big news this week, so we'll go over that. And it's good news for people who are fans of the Snapdragon X and X2 processors, and it relates to gaming. Zac, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
I'm not too bad. I'm feeling quite optimistic, I think, about recent developments. Windows has been in the news quite a lot in the last week. Some of it not so positively, but I'm reassured that there's changes and things happening to Windows that make it still fun to follow, because I feel like the last few months it's sort of gotten a bit boring, and the last week or so things got interesting again, at least for me. So we'll talk about that a little bit on the show today. How are you, Dan?
Not too bad. It's getting cold, so yeah. I don't love that part. But other than that, we haven't had snow yet, so I'm pretty happy about that. But yeah, I can't complain. I don't think had too much other stuff going on. So, oh, actually, no, wait, I gotta share this. It's personal, but it's just interesting for medical, why going to the doctors and stuff is important. So, for about 20, 25 years, I've been tired. Okay, which is like kind of weird to say.
Yeah.
But like literally the last couple of weeks, I was getting hundreds on my sleep score because I would sleep like 9.5 or 10 hours and I would still not feel good. So is this chronic fatigue syndrome? Is it, something else? I don't know. I've been trying to find out. I bought every supplement on the planet, every stimulant on the planet, um, and none of it has ever worked, or it worked but didn't last for very long. Meaning, like, I'm just like caffeine literally does nothing for me. Like, I could drink a cup of coffee and, I could drink it at night and it wouldn't bother me. So, anyways, I finally followed up with my doctor, and I've had a high TSH level for about 5 years now, which is the first time I had it tested. That's the thyroid stimulating hormone, and so it was pretty high, and they got worried about it. They did some tests, but they're just, according to them, they're just like, well, it's within the range of we're going to watch it, but we're not going to do anything about it because that's what the books say. But the fact was, I'm cold all the time too. So especially in the winter times, I
Yeah.
get freezing cold. Like I have to wear like 5 layers. It's one reason I wear stuff around my neck. So I'm like freezing cold and I'm tired, and I have like a few other things. And it turns out, yeah, I'm basically just hypothyroid. Which means I have an underproduction of the TSH and all that. So I started medication for the first time last week. And for the first time about 25 years, I feel normal, which is kind of nice.
Oh, wow.
Like I don't feel tired. My brain feels like, like I got a good night's sleep. And it's just like, because I would tire out really quickly, like mentally after an hour or two. It's one reason I had to drop out of grad school. I just like would just fatigued out. So hopefully it sticks. Hopefully I'll have to get tested again in a couple of weeks to see how it's affected. But it's also more rare in guys to get this. It's usually females get it. But yeah, get tested. Don't stop trying to figure out if something's wrong with you, and find a cool doctor who's willing to work with you on this stuff. So that's my lesson of the week. But
Nice.
anyways, let's get to the stuff that people are really interested in, which is Microsoft Windows. It's the 40th anniversary. You wrote up a nice article today going through it. And I think the bigger part, of course, was, all right, we know the history. That's great. Where's this going? So why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, so obviously today, 40 years ago, Microsoft released Windows 1.0, for a graphical user interface that ran on top of MS-DOS at the time. 40 years later, and it's probably fair to say a monumental success. It wasn't until probably Windows 95 where the version of Windows we're sort of familiar with came into the world. Windows 1 up to 3.11 or whatever it was quite different from what Windows is today. And then once we sort of switched over to Windows 95 with the taskbar and start menu and window controls and all of that file management stuff, Windows has sort of been the same ever since. Yes, we've had different themes and prettier interfaces and smoother animations since then, of course, and new features on top of that. But fundamentally, Windows is the same as it was in 1995. And so, a 30-year run for a UX paradigm of that nature is incredible, frankly. Computing hasn't really changed since the mid-90s. We still use computers with a keyboard and a mouse, with the start menu, with app windows moving around a 2D screen, and it works. It has worked for the longest time. And so, there's only one time where Microsoft really tried to deviate from that, and that was with, of course, Windows 8 in 2012. That was the only version of Windows practically ever that tried to be different, tried to be new, tried to push forward a new sort of vision for Windows. And it backfired majorly, to the point where it was so significantly negatively received that 2 years later, Microsoft had essentially undone all of the changes it made with Windows 8, and Windows 10 was more of a continuation of Windows 7 than Windows 8 than it was to Windows 8. And since then, Windows has, in my opinion, kind of stagnated a little bit. You know, we there was a glimmer of hope in 2018, 2019 with Windows Core OS and Windows 10X and the Surface Neo. That was supposed to be the future of Windows. This was a new modern version of Windows built from the ground up for a new era of devices. It was supposed to be more secure with faster Windows updates, and it was supposed to prioritize Microsoft's modern app platform, at the time being UWP. This was Microsoft's attempts to sort of step away or move away from the legacy code base that Windows is known for. And unfortunately, it failed before it even got off the ground. Microsoft never shipped Windows Core OS on any consumer-facing product. And so that vision died before it even started. And since then, we've been left with what Windows has always been since the 90s. And that is now a legacy operating system. You know, Windows 11 came along in 2021, and you know, I really do like Windows 11. I like the interface. I like how it functions. I like Windows 11. I know there's a lot of controversy and line around Windows 11, but I personally do really like it. But, you know, I'd be lying if I said it was a brand new monumental release for the platform. It's just a continuation of Windows 10. It's Windows 10 with a prettier face and a couple of new productivity features, but it maintains the status quo. It's still Windows from 1995. And so, you know, I've been quite disappointed by that. The fact that Microsoft didn't go down that other path of modernizing Windows and bringing it to new form factors, and instead decided to stick with what Windows has always been good at, which is this legacy PC platform, has disappointed me. And I feel like today, more than ever, the age of Windows, the bloatedness of Windows and the core of the operating system is more apparent than ever, especially when you compare it to things like Android and iPadOS and Chrome OS even. It's just so old and bloated, and support and also a user interface people are familiar with. But on the flip side, I'm kind of tired of Windows as it currently is. I'm not a huge fan of it continuing to be this bloated legacy operating system. And with AI coming along now, you know, during Windows' 40th anniversary, believe it or not, it was just very surprisingly, interestingly timed. You know, it just feels like Microsoft is bolting AI on top of the status quo. It's like we're not... I would have thought 2 years ago, if this AI wave was coming, we'd get a brand new version of Windows built on a lightweight, modern core with a radical new user interface, and this idea that this is an agentic OS. This is what the future of computing can be like with AI. Except what we've got is Windows 11 with AI bolted on top. That's not innovation to me. That's bloating an operating system that's already bloated. And I think a lot of people agree, because obviously, as we're about to discuss in the last week or so, there's been a lot of pushback against Microsoft's vision for an agentic OS on Windows 11. And I'm just very surprised that Microsoft has gone down this route of trying to AIify this 30-year-old UX, essentially. You know, the desktop taskbar thing. I really would have thought if Microsoft was going to go all in on AI, they were going to do something radical and new and change what it means to compute, to be a computer or to use a computer. But we're not really seeing that, at least not yet. And as a result of that, I think the opinion of Windows right now is on the decline. I think people aren't too happy with the state of the platform. They don't like how bloated it is. They don't like all the enshittification. They don't like the Microsoft account requirements. Don't like all the ads. The list goes on and on. Everybody has some complaint about Windows 11 currently. And with AI being such a focal point for Microsoft, a lot of people are viewing that as ignoring the issues with Windows, which isn't, I don't think, entirely true. I think Microsoft is doing both. They are addressing the issues and doing AI. But because of all the marketing is on the AI stuff, people only see all the new AI things being announced for Windows and less on the improvements and fixes that are being made for power users. Microsoft's Pavan Devuluri has come out and said that, you know, they are addressing the concerns that power users and developers have with Windows, and that Windows will always be a great place for those users. But it does feel like AI has taken priority over all of the other issues within Windows right now, and I think that's rubbing people the wrong way. And so I think as Windows enters into its 40th year, I think if Microsoft continues down this path, I wouldn't be surprised if in another 40 years Windows is no longer relevant in the consumer space. I think Windows will fade into irrelevancy and become an enterprise cloud-based OS, because this is the moment where it needs to make changes. It's now. If Microsoft wants Windows to remain as the platform for gamers and consumers and enterprises and everyone which currently uses it, I think they need to split Windows in two. If they want to go down this AI route, they have to do a dedicated AI version of Windows that goes all out and does, you know, these radical new things that are only possible because of AI. And then it should also maintain a legacy version of Windows, such as Windows 11, for the people who don't want that vision. Because I think if AI is as good as Microsoft says it is, it will speak for itself and people will want to switch to the AI version of Windows. Surely, right? Dan, you got any thoughts on that?
Yes.
Good.
Let's move on. All right. No. Sorry, there was a lot there to obviously talk about. So, yeah, we talked about it before regarding Windows, the problem it has, which is because it was so successful, it gets locked in to where it has to be.
Yeah.
So they also have, of course, around 50% of PC sales and stuff like that is enterprise, right? And we know how conservative companies are with this stuff because it's cost and no one likes to spend money on it, right? So they have this problem where, like, your point about them wanting to, or they should make a new Windows that's AI and has a completely new radical way of thinking. Do we know for a fact that they're not developing that? Because I mean,
Yeah.
even if like I don't think they would have an answer to that right now. I feel like it is too early because this stuff is moving so quickly. Like, I don't know what that would even look like, but I would have to imagine that they're having these conversations, prototyping ideas, and trying different things. So I do feel like that if they're going to do it, it's going to take a little while till some of this AI stuff actually settles down as a little bit more developed. But that said, something like that would probably take a really long time to go to enterprise, right? So this would have to be a pretty much a consumer play where they focus on that while they also maintain what would be the Windows 11 legacy as for the old stuff, which they can do. We've had Windows NT before. We've had these two separate operating systems exist. So I think that's one route that they can do, but they definitely have problems to solve. This idea of like, what would an AI operating system look like? Like I said, I haven't even seen any concepts from anyone that actually addresses that, right? And it's an interesting point about the next 40 years about Windows. Like, I don't think we're going to have operating systems like this in 40 years. I think that would be really weird, actually. The way stuff is moving so quickly right now, I feel like it's really hard to predict 5 years out, let alone 40. But like, I mean, we're moving towards already implants in our brains, right? And it's just a matter of time before those get connected to the internet. Someone does that, which I'm not saying is necessarily a good idea, but being able to control hardware and stuff with your brain is going to be a thing, definitely within 40 years. And this idea of applications and stuff like that, like, an AI is going to become so powerful that, like, I don't know if we're going to need applications, right? You can already feed AI documents, video, audio, basically anything digital, and ask it to manipulate it and change it. And there's different various degrees of success with that, of course, but that stuff is rapidly improving. So in the future, it's just like, how much of an operating system do we really need, right? I imagine a web browser will stick around for a while. You still need like visual assets, going visit a website, a product, shopping online, of course. But even that might change. So I don't know. There's definitely a lot of changes and things in motion from Microsoft. I obviously don't hate Windows 11 as a lot of people do. Actually, like you, I like a lot of it. I like a lot of the changes that they brought. I think they're doing faster innovation with Windows 11 than any operating system I've seen them do before. We get pretty significant updates. Now, you and I have also agreed that it would be better maybe if they saved all those features for one yearly release where they can get on stage and being like, here's the new Windows 11 and here's what it can do now. I still think they should do that because I do think people don't appreciate, you get these small little features throughout the year and your brain is just like, they didn't do anything. Like,
Yeah.
they didn't roll out any updates. It's like, what about this, and that? Like, oh yeah, okay, that was this year. Oh, all right. So people don't associate the branding, and the changes with that. And that's, I think, a missed opportunity just for what is marketing, right? And what you were talking about before with consumers and sentiment towards Microsoft and Windows and all this kind of stuff. It is a form of marketing. They do a poor job of marketing Windows.
Yeah.
I would also say the other thing with AI, because people, and you're right about this, like consumers and normal people are not that excited about AI. Sure, they use it for creating video and funny stuff on the internet, but it hasn't become this thing where people feel like it's quite necessary. Until AI can actually help make you money or like solve like real problems in your world, I don't think that's going to change. And I think that will happen. How that happens, though, is going to, I think, is up in the air. But I think that's when AI will really become sort of ingrained. And I will say that, companies like Microsoft are obviously going hardcore on AI because everyone believes this is definitely the future. There was a lot of talk this week with NVIDIA because they did their earnings yesterday. And there were two modes of thought. One, they were going to beat expectations because they had just sealed some really nice deals with government. The other one was they're going to underreport and miss earnings, which would be the first signs that we're in an AI bubble, which is what everybody keeps saying. And we may be, but I don't think we're there yet. So I think there's a lot of growth. But so what ended up happening was NVIDIA beat expectations by like they did really, really well, actually. So there's really no signs that they're slowing down and demand is slowing down. So it doesn't seem to be any kind of drag on this stuff. But I don't know. The next couple of years is going to be really fascinating to see how Microsoft and other companies navigate this.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And I do agree with you as well. The idea of operating systems is going to fundamentally change in the next probably decade, or even probably less time than that. If AI continues on its trajectory and it isn't a bubble and it does, keep going and become more capable, yeah, if AI wearables become a thing, we've talked about this before, like Windows probably doesn't even fit in that vision anymore. And so I don't know how Microsoft will navigate that market. And to be fair, Microsoft put itself in that corner. When Microsoft gave up on modernizing the Windows platform, that's when they sort of wrote off any possibility of expanding Windows to new markets. I mean, if you remember when Windows 10 launched, there was this promise of a version of Windows for every kind of device, whether it be a wearable all the way through to a 55-inch Surface Hub or beyond. There was a version of Windows for everything. And then over the course of Windows 10's life, that vision died off. And when Windows 11 came around, it was just, here's a PC operating system, have fun with it. And so if there is a new form factor on the horizon because of AI, Windows probably isn't in a position currently to adopt that, especially if it's very low power, such as a wristwatch or a pair of glasses or a pendant that you wear around your neck. However these AI devices present themselves, I don't think Windows is in a place where it can be shrunk down enough to be able to run on these devices, at least not currently. If there is a project internally where they've been working on that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I know they have always been trying to modernize Windows. Core PC, the most recent, I guess, or Win Layers is also another thing they've been doing. But nothing ships. This is my problem, is that, yeah, I'm sure Microsoft is exploring what a version of Windows could be if it was built from the ground up with AI. But based on history, it will never ship because it isn't Windows, or it isn't the Windows that people are familiar with. And so I think, on Windows' 40th birthday, my message to Microsoft is, don't be afraid. Try new things. You can do both. You can do the boring Windows 11 with all the boring taskbar and start menu, and you can also do something brand new and exciting. You can do
They
both.
really need to release products meant for super tech savvy people, but have it like open. So like, there's always this talk about Windows Phone. Oh, they should bring back Windows Phone. Like that, no, not as it was, and it's got to be completely different. By different, I mean they should just make a pocket PC, which they could do now with its own unique operating system that's also open source, but can like work with Windows apps and stuff like that, but have it like very configurable so you can manipulate the hardware, add things, remove things. So it's not going to be like a gorgeous looking device, but there's like a lot of, and I forgot some of the names, but there's like a lot of this stuff out there. There are a lot of Kickstarters and stuff like that where they create like a little piece of hardware. And it's like, what do you do with it? It's like, well, we don't really know. It's like, it's got these features, so figure out something to do with it. And people will sort of start creating things to do with this. And it could even be AI based and AI focused and all this kind of stuff. Granted, you have two devices at that point, but The idea is like they could try and getting that stuff into like real nerds' hands and letting them just go crazy with it with open source and all that, I think would be a really interesting idea. Even if they, we talk about Lenovo, how they do this all the time, right? They always release like crazy hardware that we know no one's really going to buy. Um, but they do it because they want to test it. They want to get, feedback from people, and then they take that information and they bring it back, and then they make a new product from that. And it's not always going to be, like the rollable displays. Like, I don't know what the feedback is on that. People may be like, I like this, but not that. And Lenovo may go, you know what? This instantiation of a rollable display is not what people want, but we think we can do it this way. Maybe that will work. And I think Microsoft just needs to do that kind of stuff a lot more and really just sort of work with the tech community and like the hacker community and all this kind of stuff. That would really drive kind of demand. And then that information can flow back up to creating any kind of consumer product where you take out the technical aspects of this.
I do think if you appease the tech nerds, the geeks, the developers, and I mean all these terms endearingly, then that positive sentiment does flow back down to consumers. I think a lot of the times Windows has been deemed, like a version of Windows has been deemed bad. It's because, the tech press or developers or power users have viewed it and gone, this is terrible, this sucks, no, but you shouldn't buy this. And then, that you tell your parents that, you tell your siblings, your friends that, and that the message spreads, Windows Vista may be warranted slightly at launch, but I think Vista overall was a great operating system, but it will always be cemented as a bad version of Windows. Same goes for Windows 8. Yes, the UX was radically different and it was a bit of a learning curve, but the operating system was great. They made a lot of awesome changes under the hood with Windows 8 that benefit Windows to this day. But Windows 8 will always go down as a bad version of Windows. And I think
I think that's one reason why they don't do radical experimental UIs anymore. It's like.
But I would say this is what I'm saying. Like, they should just do two versions. They should do a boring version for the people, the people who are sticking the muds, and they should do the new version for everybody else, or the people who do want to push forward. And because time will bring people over to the new vision. Like, that's how it all it might take 5 years, it might take 10 years, it might take 2 or 3 versions, but people will eventually adopt this newer vision that Microsoft has for this separate new version of Windows. It may not be an immediate success, and this is Microsoft's problem really, is that if things aren't immediately successful for them, they drop it.
Right. and they don't let the market. They're not like Samsung, which we talked about. We're on the Fold 7 now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it took them, I would argue, 7 folds to get to where people are genuinely blown away by the current version. Like, yes, that's what it should have been from day one, but they couldn't make it on day one. They had to take their time and invest and get feedback and figure out the technology. I mean, if you look at the Pocket PC, that's, where I got a lot of my start from. Although, actually, my first operating system was Windows 3.11. And then I remember 95 coming out and going through that. So, but a couple of years later, I got a Pocket PC. And I remember still, I've talked about this, how I thought Pocket PCs were literally could run Windows apps because it looked just like Windows. And it couldn't. It was a completely different architecture. But it still had a bunch of apps, and people were just doing cool stuff on it all the time. They're hacking, creating programs, and creating skins, and just doing all this kind of stuff. And then eventually the industry went, hey, this stuff is kind of cool. Imagine if we put a phone in it, And then you could just have this one thing that does everything. And that's how smartphones came to be. And sure, they were terrible at first. It wasn't like mainstream people didn't buy them, but nerds bought them. And then, of course, it was Apple, that came along and sort of mainstreamed it all. But that's where that stuff came from. So I think they need to get back to those kind of, those roots where you're thinking. They even did this kind of years ago. Remember the Microsoft Garage projects that they had, where they would like the developers would work on their off time and create like kind of crazy apps. Like, they need to get back to that mindset again. Doesn't have to be the whole company. It's just let some of your teams go out there and try to create new stuff and then let it go from there.
Yeah, they shouldn't be afraid to try and innovate. You know, most things won't
Yeah.
stick, but something could, and that you could define the next decade of computing if you just try. And I think that's my other problem with Windows right now is that everything Microsoft does with Windows feels reactionary, even like right down to the Copilot Plus PC stuff with Qualcomm and the Snapdragon X. That was just a reaction to Apple Silicon 4 years earlier, and the same with One Core and Windows Core OS. That was just a reaction to Apple building an operating system that ran across iPhone and iPad and Apple Watch. You know, like it just all seems very reactionary. The last time really that Microsoft innovated with something that stuck was Windows 8 and the Surface Pro, and even then it was less Windows 8 and more the form factor of the Surface Pro that stuck around. You know, Microsoft's vision for a touch first operating system, version of Windows at least, faded into the background with Windows 10 and basically was lost to time. And so, you know, I think Microsoft should just be bold more often. I think, especially when it comes
And
to
as much as I love Surface Pro, it is still one of my favorite PCs. That form factor has not even come close to being mainstream, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I will say it has influenced the market because I feel like the iPad Pro is what it is today because of
Yeah,
the Surface Pro. But
yeah, no, definitely. But like other companies like HP and Lenovo
yeah,
have all tried tablets, and they still have occasional ones, usually for
mhm.
business, because that's the only market that they can kind of compete in. But for consumers, you know, it really hasn't like turned into that's now the default style of
No,
PC.
you're right, and yeah, I'm not surprised with that as well. I think the laptop is such a great form factor that it's really hard to shove that off a pedestal. I mean, I think the Surface Pro killed off pure tablets. I think pure tablets make no sense
Right.
without a kickstand and this idea that they can be more than just a tablet. And that's why the iPad is now what it is because Apple saw what Microsoft did with the Pro, realized, oh, people actually want their tablet to do more than just tablet things. And that's why iPad OS is the mess it is today.
Yeah.
But at least Apple are trying, and you know things like Stage Manager, which was a new way of window management on a desktop operating system on the Mac OS side at least. I don't think that's been received too well, but at least they were trying something new in regards to desktop UX. Windows feels very stagnant as you know as an alternative in that regard, and so yeah, I think that's what my message is for Windows on its 40th birthday. It's just try a new thing, be bold, and you know try to set the narrative again because that's kind of what Windows did in the 90s, and sadly it's not really had the and it tried to do Windows 8 I guess, but it just hasn't had the same impact since. And so I'd like to see Microsoft go back to being more bold with Windows. Well, speaking of boldness, we can talk about Microsoft's agentic OS plans because those have sort of started coming into fruition in the last couple of weeks. You know, Microsoft hasn't been teasing for a while that Windows would eventually become an agentic OS, and we're now starting to see the foundations of that in the operating system. Ignite was this week, and they announced a number of stuff in regards to this, but they've also got a support document that sort of breaks down how agentic features are going to work within the operating system. And this week they even released a new preview build that has the option to enable the experimental agentic features. It doesn't currently do anything because it relies on apps to be able to actually be agentic. So it's not just the operating system as an agent itself. The OS isn't the agent. The OS holds a framework for agents to be able to manipulate the operating system. But how it works is for a feature called Agent Workspace, which Microsoft describes as a separate contained space in Windows where you can grant agents access to your apps and files so they can complete tasks for you in the background while you continue to use your device. Each agent will operate using its own account distinct from your personal user account, and the dedicated agent account establishes clear boundaries between agent activity and your own, enabling scoped authorization and runtime isolation. And so this feature will tie into, I believe third parties can also build for it, but Copilot Actions, which is a feature Microsoft already announced, will tap into this, where you can ask Copilot to complete a task on your behalf, and then you'll see Copilot load up its own little desktop within the app, and it will have a start menu and taskbar, and it will click through the operating system and do whatever it is you've asked it to do, which is really cool. This feature is really, really interesting, I think. And this isn't how I would have thought agentic experiences were going to be implemented on Windows, but I think Microsoft is doing it this way because it's the most secure. In my head, when this conversation first started happening, I would have just assumed the agents ran around your desktop, like within your user account, and just did whatever they were doing, you know, alongside you. But no, Microsoft has isolated it so each agent has its own local user account that sort of runs concurrently alongside yours. So if you've ever used a Windows PC with multiple user accounts, it's essentially the exact same thing.
How weird would it be like once in a while you log into one of your side accounts there with one of these agentic AIs, and it's like logging to your like Sim City after sleeping it for a while. It's like what is it doing? Like I
Yeah.
mean that would actually be kind of cool. But yeah, this idea of like the AI just has its own desktop and gets to play around with everything. Um, that's kind of wild. It's actually a really good leverage. You mentioned the security aspect, but it's a good leverage of an existing ability within Windows to be able to do that.
Yeah, and security is a really important aspect of this design for Microsoft. They go into security quite heavily in this document, quite surprisingly, and they're very blunt about the kind of risks this feature enables. They do say it's off by default for security reasons. So your Windows 11 isn't agentic out of the box. You have to go in and enable the option yourself before Windows can even begin presenting agentic capabilities to AI agents. But they do say, let's see. As these capabilities introduce, AI models still face functional limitations in terms of how they behave and occasionally may hallucinate and produce unexpected outputs. Additionally, agentic AI applications introduce novel security risks, such as cross-prompt injection, where malicious content embedded in UI elements or documents can override agent instructions, leading to unintended actions like data exfiltration or malware installation. So straight out, Microsoft is saying that, look, you enable this feature, the AI might install malware if it gets caught in a security hole where it's been tricked into doing that. And that's a concern that Microsoft apparently can't build around currently. They're trying their best, and obviously containerizing these in their own desktop environments and having that giving them less user permissions is an attempt to stop that. But for the AI to work best, you do have to grant it access to your own documents and pictures and video files and whatnot. Otherwise, it won't be able to do work for you, right? If you asked it to, crop all these images to 16:9, it wouldn't be able to do that in its own desktop environment unless you gave it access to your local user account data. So you have to do that for it to be useful. And this is kind of the problem with AI, right? It requires such an unprecedented level of data access that it is a security risk and it is a security concern. And so Microsoft, I think, to cover their backs, has to be very open about the security risks of an agentic OS. And that's probably why we haven't seen like a full agentic OS from Microsoft yet. This, because there are so many security holes and so much privacy concern and lots of data access that needs to be required for it to be functional. So Microsoft has published this blog post, this support document, and at Ignite this week they also announced a bunch of things such as AI agents on the taskbar, which is essentially a feature that will let you hover over an icon on the taskbar that shows you an AI agent that's currently running, so you'll be able to see a brief overview of its current prompt and its progress within that prompt, and then you'll be able to end it or click into it to take over if you needed to, straight from the taskbar, which is really nice. But it's really interesting that this vision for the future of Windows has been met with significant backlash. Last week, the current Windows lead, Pavan Davuluri, he posted a message on X, just advertising one of the Ignite sessions. But in his tweet, it mentions Windows is evolving into an agentic OS. And for whatever reason, this is the tweet that caught all of the flack. Because if you go to that tweet and you look at all the replies, they are overwhelmingly negative. I would say for every one tweet that's positive
on the internet, people complaining,
right? If for every one tweet that's positive, there are 100 negative ones. People are not happy with this vision for Windows. They don't want Windows to become an agentic OS. They're not interested in Microsoft's AI efforts on Windows. It got so bad that Davuluri had to disable replies on his tweet, although he did follow up later and sort of reassure people that yes, he was aware that there was a lot of negative backlash to the vision of an agentic OS, and that Microsoft is looking through the feedback and are going to adjust things accordingly. But I think whatever happens going forward, there will still be AI in Windows, because there has to be. Microsoft is an AI company. There's no scenario where Microsoft isn't doing AI in Windows going forward. But this response sort of trickled into other parts of other things Microsoft has been doing with AI over the weekend and whatnot. There was an advertising campaign for Copilot that kicked off using YouTubers and influencers to show off some of Copilot's capabilities. And the first video they published, there was I can't believe this was able to get out and go through marketing, and then everyone gave it the thumbs up. But there was this video where one of the YouTubers is asking Copilot how to change the size of text in Windows. And Copilot's like, hey, yeah, if you click on this, you can change the size of text in there. The YouTuber's like, okay, I've clicked there. Where do I click next? Which is already like showing holes in the demo. Like, why wouldn't Copilot just walk you through the whole process instead of you having to prompt it again to help you further? But then Copilot's like, yeah, if you change the size of the scaling here, that will make text bigger. And then the YouTuber goes, okay, so which percentage should I select? And Copilot says, oh, you should select 150%. Windows was already set to 150%. So if the YouTuber had done that, nothing would have changed. So the YouTuber just ignores Copilot and selects 200 to make things look bigger. But even then, the YouTuber asked Copilot how to change the size of text, not how to change the size of UI elements. And so Windows has an accessibility feature that allows you to change the size of just text. So surely Copilot should have taken the user to that setting instead, right? Well, as you can expect, the comments had a field day. People are replying to this going, what the hell is this? Actually, people were saying things like, this is actually the most accurate AI demo I've ever seen. It completely useless, very slow, doesn't even do what you want it to do. Like, yeah, this is not a great advert for Copilot. Microsoft has since deleted the video because that was shocking. But that's just another example of people jumping on the bandwagon going, yeah, this is a prime example of why Microsoft focusing so heavily on AI in Windows makes no sense, because it barely even works. And then to top things all off, Microsoft's AI CEO, Mustafa Suleyman, made a tweet sort of pushing back against the recent criticism over the weekend, which bold move, in my opinion. But he said, and I'll read his tweet word for word. He goes, geez, there are so many cynics. It cracks me up when I hear people call AI underwhelming. I grew up playing Snake on a Nokia phone. The fact that people are unimpressed that we can have fluent conversations with a super smart AI that can generate any image/video is mind-blowing to me. As you can probably imagine, the replies to this were not great either. People going, yeah, this guy's tone deaf. Like, see, look at the product you're building. Look at this video that you guys put out. There are so many holes. There are so many problems with AI. The fact that you're so heavily focused on it when it's not as, when it's this bad or whatever isn't great. And Windows in its current state needs attention elsewhere versus you working on putting Copilot in every single UI surface you possibly can. Like even Notepad has Copilot in it now. Like things like that, I think really grind people's gears. And so this all sort of, it's just been a bad week for Microsoft when it comes to marketing AI in Windows. And timed with Ignite and the 40th anniversary, when Microsoft's new Windows tagline, by the way, is your canvas for AI. It's just all really poorly timed with everyone pushing so hard back against Microsoft's AI efforts. Dan, I'm curious on your thoughts on this, because I know the question I have really is this just a vocal minority complaining, or is this what the general population thinks about AI in Windows? Do they think Windows AI sucks?
Well, I mean, to answer that last question, you really need, and I need data, right? And I'm sure Microsoft has this. They're always doing trials and group testing and getting feedback and surveys and polls. I mean, heck, a lot of us get those notifications in Windows asking for feedback, which then people complain about. So I'm sure some way they have this data and could really answer that question. It's well known on the internet that comments and any place people talk tends to be negative, because as we said, previously, that when people are angry and don't like something, they're more likely to vent and tell people, versus if you like it, you just kind of go on with your life, or you're indifferent to it, especially, right? You're not going, if you're indifferent to something, you're not going to take time out of your day to go on the internet and like lambast people for stuff. So I will say this is a sort of, and plus it is on Twitter. So which is already a pretty angry place, right? There's not a lot. I remember back in the day when Twitter was like a fun place and people were just teasing each other and having fun. And then politics came in, and now it's just like, and it became acceptable just to be rude to people. And I think that was almost sort of the attraction. It's like, here's a famous actor, I'm going to tell him he's a jerk. Like, and it's just like you can do that and be anonymous at the same time. So I do take a lot of this with a grain of salt. That said, I don't think it's probably too far from the mark where that there is going to be a portion of the audience who is completely unhappy with this stuff. Just like the telemetry aspect of it, right? Like, I never said that the telemetry collection in Microsoft is not a security concern or people shouldn't care about it. But I think most people don't, and that's fine. I don't care about it. I don't think about it either. But there is a group of people out there who are very passionate about this topic, and they go out of their way to turn everything off, and they come out with hacks and programs to install that'll do this for you, and they're very vocal about it, and that's fine. Like, they're entitled to that opinion of stuff. Doesn't mean, though, that their opinion needs to necessarily override the rest of us kind of not caring. So I don't know. I feel like this is just kind of the internet. But like I said, the AI stuff until there's a proven feature for people every day, besides generating your homework, I don't. It's going to be a tough sell right now. A lot of the investment in AI is right now done on the promise of increasing worker productivity, which simply means you get more done with kind of less effort. But it means instead of working an 8-hour day, you still work an 8-hour day, but it's almost like 12 hours of work, right? So it's about squeezing more out of you through this technology. That doesn't really benefit you. Also, it means that there's fewer people, or there could be, right? So if you're a team of 3 people compared to a team of 50 right now, that team of 50 can do way more, especially if they have like people dedicated to specific tasks like graphics and marketing and all this kind of stuff. But now with AI, it starts to level that field, right? Now those 3 people can become really effective compared to that 50. Of course, then that 50 can level up themselves. But until all that stuff translates into something tangible for everyday people, it's not going to really do much, right? The benefit of Apple and with the iPhone, its big thing was and still is FaceTime, right? It's about connecting your family together. It's what a lot of people like about Apple stuff. It's like, I know where my family is. It's all on here. I can track them. I can talk to them instantly. Like that whole thing. That solved problems for people with communication. And that's why that caught on. But until AI can get to some level, and it's an if, technically, although I think it will happen. I think people are going to continue to complain about it because they're not going to see any real benefit. But even for gamers who are the world's most complainingest, like this idea of like the assistant that they have right now, I think as that improves, I think that's kind of wild. Like that you can just play a game and then you can hit the AI button and be like, hey, I'm stuck in this part. Can you give me some tips? And this AI comes in and goes, oh yeah, I see what you're doing. Yeah, you want to do this, that, and that. Instead of having to pause the game, open a laptop, go watch a YouTube video, and scrub through the video, try to find the thing you need and all that. Like, so I think we will see some of this benefits stuff, but it's going to take a little while before people's minds get changed. And then even then, you're not going to see people come out, I don't think, in overwhelming waves of being like, oh my God, AI is amazing. I think people will just become like used to it and be like, oh yeah, it's AI and I just use it every day. And yeah.
Well, that's what I've said that since the beginning. AI is best when it's invisible, when it's automatic, when I don't have to, engineer it into doing what I need it to. When it knows me and it's capable of just being helpful, that's when AI wins, in my opinion. But that's what's so fascinating to me about why Microsoft is focused. It's everything it does around AI. Every single announcement has to mention AI at least once, and that's just what's so funny to me because to me, the perfect AI is one that we don't talk about. It's just omnipresent. It's everywhere, and it's just constantly working. And we don't talk about it because it's just like how we don't talk about the taskbar or we don't talk about window controls in an app. It's just there. They do their function. AI should be another one of those things. And so, maybe it's just like this right now because it is new and it is the current thing to talk about. Maybe in 5 years, we won't be talking about AI. It will still be here and it will still be something we talk about something we use every single day, but it won't be something we have to actively talk about because it's finally just doing its job and being useful. That's my hope for AI because I've still not been able to fully get on board with this whole chatbot thing. I'm not interested in talking to, I'm not interested in talking to humans most days over text, let alone a non-human. I can't be bothered.
Yeah. To address your question about why everything is AI, there is the buzzword aspect of it, right? And don't forget, their job is not really to sell you Windows. It's really to sell stock, right?
Sure.
Because they're a privately traded company. So like the reason why, well, in the last 5 years, Microsoft is up 128%. Just this year, they're up 15%. And they're listed as a strong buy for for their stock, even at their current ratio and pricing the stock. So yeah, so when I'm just reading Microsoft stock to 550 a share, that's what they're saying. It's at 480 right now, so that's a while to go. So that's the reason why, though. It's because, yeah, again, all those people complain on Twitter, and Satya would just be like, Have you seen our stock? Have you seen our
Yeah.
results and our revenue? Like, they're making so much money from Azure from selling um, mega compute to other AI companies. They're getting like rich off of this stuff. So that's why, and
Yeah.
the thing is, they have to be first, because if they're not first to this, this group always complains, Microsoft is always late. Oh, now they're first and they're pretty far ahead, that partnering up with OpenAI. Can you imagine if Apple had made that deal instead?
Yeah.
How different things would be? So I think we need to give Microsoft a little credit here. That OpenAI investment was genius, and it's really paid off for them. And granted, it killed Windows Phone, and this would have been a great time to have a mobile device,
Yep.
but it is what it is. But they're ahead in AI, and their stock is going up and up, and it continues to go up, and that's why, So like, I know people are mad on Twitter, but it's like at the end of the day, this is how capitalism works, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I totally understand why Microsoft is AI crazy right now. It's just a shame that it's impacting every part of the product, the company outside of AI, like things like
Absolutely.
Surface. I feel
Yeah.
like Surface isn't suffering per se, but they're no longer what Surface used to be, which was this product
Right.
line of unique form factors that were niche and trying new things every year. But now it's just it's a 2-in-1 and it's a laptop. That's what Surface is,
Yeah.
and they will not deviate, which I think is a shame. But that's my example. That's kind of the downside of this focus. Is that things like Surface and to an extent sort of Xbox suffer. Like there's been a lot of scrapped Xbox plans, like your games cancelled, hardware scrapped because
Mhm.
they wanted to put the money where AI is, and that's not Xbox currently. And so, yeah, that aspect certainly sucked, and all the layoffs as well, and all that stuff also very bad and not great. But yeah, I guess for the shareholders, it's been a great couple of years. Right now, let's talk about some news that isn't AI directly related. Anyway, so at Ignite, Microsoft actually made some interesting announcements around Windows as a platform. Although there is one AI announcement I want to quickly touch on here, and that's more productivity AI features. So this is outside of the agentic stuff. This is more sort of surface level, sort of I call this useful AI. And so there's 4 features Microsoft announced: a writing assistance feature, Outlook summary, Word auto, alt text, and fluid dictation. So writing assistance is the ability to generate text or rewrite text in any text box across the OS, and it will work on Copilot Plus PCs offline. So if you have a Copilot Plus PC, this will leverage the NPU. If you don't have a Copilot Plus PC, it will reach out to the cloud, which is really nice that they've done that. And I'd like to see more AI features do that on Copilot Plus PCs, where it exists on both, but the Copilot Plus PC has the benefit of using the onboard silicon to actually power it versus always requiring the internet and reaching out to the cloud. Outlook summary, simply is as what it says on the tin. It's going to generate summaries in Outlook, which is nice. This one sounds super useful in Word. Word will be able to automatically add text to images, so that describe what the image is based on what it can see, which is really nice. And then lastly, fluid dictation, which is an AI-powered voice feature that turns speech into polished text, correcting grammar, punctuation, and filler words in real time. So that's going to be super handy if you're somebody who likes to transcribe things, or say if you're in the car and you need to write up a report or some sort of editorial. Instead of typing out, you can just talk to your computer, and Windows would do its best to sort of clean it up on the fly so it's presentable as a written piece of text, which is really kind of cool as well. So those are the 4 AI productivity features Microsoft announced, which will be coming to Windows 11 in early 2026. I don't believe any of these are in preview yet in the insider builds, but they are supposed to debut early next year, which is really nice to see. So that's the last of the AI features. Now move on to some of the platform level features that are outside of AI, starting with some driver improvements. Microsoft says they're raising the bar when it comes to driver resiliency and stability. And so this is sort of an extension of what they sort of put in motion with the antivirus stuff last year, after the CrowdStrike issue, where that CrowdStrike pushed a driver to Windows that caused it to blue screen. Microsoft has made a lot of improvements to Windows under the hood, so that Windows can be recovered more easily when it is put into a catastrophic state where it can't boot up. And now they're extending the changes they've made to the drivers for antivirus to the rest of well, most of the drivers on Windows, including things like cameras, USBs, printers, storage, networking, etc., etc. Graphics drivers are exempt from this because obviously graphic drivers require a lot more data and a lot more access, and so that's not included in this. But Microsoft says for most other peripherals, driver signing will require a higher security and resilience bar with many new certifications tests. And they also say they are expanding Microsoft-provided Windows inbox drivers and APIs, so partners can replace many custom kernel drivers with standardized Windows drivers or move logic to user mode. This is a big one because a lot of peripherals you likely use will build their own driver and integrate with the kernel, and that over time can bog Windows down. One of the reasons why people say clean installing Windows every now and again is a good idea is because if you've been using a single install Windows for a long time and you've installed loads of drivers and plugged loads of things in and unplugged, you plug something into Windows, the driver remains installed. Unplugging it doesn't uninstall that driver again, and it stays there forever. And if you're clogging up the kernel and the lower levels of the operating system with all that stuff, a reinstall can often help. And so with Microsoft providing more inbox drivers for peripherals and whatnot, that helps Windows stay leaner because OEMs won't need to build drivers for every single thing anymore. They can just rely on the inbox Windows driver, which it should make the operating system less bloated overall, which is nice. And Microsoft also says, over the coming years, we expect significant reduction in code that runs in the kernel mode across driver classes such as networking, cameras, USBs, printers, batteries, storage, and audio. So they also say for kernel mode drivers, we're adding practical guardrails that improve quality and contain faults before they become outages. These include new mandatory compiler safeguards to constrain driver behavior, driver isolation to limit blast radius, and DMA remapping to prevent accidental driver access to kernel memory. So all of these changes are designed to just make Windows more stable. And this is really addressing one of the complaints power users have, is that Windows doesn't seem that stable these days. This change here should help with that, because it isn't just Windows that makes Windows unstable. It's all the things you plug into it. It's all the drivers, all the apps you install, everything that manipulates the OS or requires the OS to make changes at a system level for something to function can impact the stability of the OS. And Microsoft moving things out of the kernel and also providing its own drivers for a number of peripherals should help with things being more stable. So that's super reassuring to see Microsoft announce. They also announced a new feature called Point in Time. Actually, announced quite a few new recovery tools. One of them called Point in Time Restore, which allows you to roll back individual or groups of devices to a previous state before an issue started occurring without complex troubleshooting. So this is very similar to the old system restore feature in Windows, where Windows will constantly make a snapshot of a working state of your computer. I believe you can set how often it does that. And if for whatever reason,
it's also something. It's also something that somewhat enterprise laptops do.
Yeah.
It's part of their security packages. They could do this.
Mm-hmm. And so if Windows does find itself in a state where it's been knocked offline due to a faulty driver or a program that's messed with a system file or something, you will be able to restore back to a ideally recent previous snapshot where Windows was working, and so you can easily recover the system without having to restore from an entire image back up or reinstall Windows entirely, which is often the case for most people. And there's also a cloud rebuild feature, which is for people who use Intune, so you'll be able to tell work-issued PCs, if you're the IT admin, to pull a recovery image from your own sort of you can choose the version of Windows, for example, and you can specify what is actually restored versus having to restore a vanilla image, then customize it yourself, which is nice. And then Quick Machine Recovery, which was announced a while ago now, is now generally available, which is nice as well. So that's cool to see in regards to the recovery stuff. Again, more stuff designed to just make Windows more stable. In the event that it does get knocked offline, there's so many different ways now to recover Windows back to a working state. They even announced a feature for point of service machines where now if Windows gets knocked offline, it will only show an error screen for a few seconds and then it will go blank. And that, of course, is to hide the Windows blue screen of death. If you are in an airport and you have those massive 100-inch displays and Windows crashes, you won't see a Windows error screen for very long. And so, which, avoids a headache for Microsoft and marketing and whatnot. So that's good to see as well. And then lastly, the other thing they announced is a feature that people have been begging for 100 years since Windows 11 debuted, and that's the agenda view in the calendar flyout on the taskbar. Windows 11 has had a calendar flyout since day one, but what it hasn't had is the ability to see upcoming events and meetings in that interface. That's a feature that Windows 10 had. It was removed with Windows 11 because obviously Windows 11 rebuilt the taskbar from the ground up, and they've only just gotten around to adding that functionality back. So starting, I believe, next month in preview, Microsoft says the new agenda view will appear right in the notification center, offering a quick glance chronological list of your upcoming events seamlessly integrated with calendar in one unified interface. Users will also be able to interact directly with the events shown in their agenda view, such as joining a scheduled meeting or engaging with Microsoft 365 Copilot. So that's super awesome. That's another productivity feature that people have been asking for that Microsoft is finally addressing. Next, they just need to make it so you can move the taskbar around. That would make a lot of power users happy. At this point, just do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's long overdue for, it's one of those things, like, I assume it's probably a lot of work. If not, it's just like, this is just low-hanging fruit to make people stop complaining. Like, they should have just done this like years ago. Just to get people, because I hear it almost every time I talk about Windows, someone complains about that.
Right.
Actually, all I want, I'm going to complain. I've said this before. All I want is, I want to be able to move my notifications, the flyouts.
Yeah.
Because they always come from the lower corner.
Yeah.
And I tend to have a lot of always open dialogues. I'll be typing something and then it just cuts off. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, I know they don't want to default to the top because that's where Apple puts them, but let me have that option.
Do it, yeah.
Just to put it up at the top right corner or even the left-hand corner, wherever I want it, right? Like, that's the only thing that really drives me nuts. Because for some reason, especially on Slack or Telegram, the way I have things, split on my screen, I always have a dialogue window in that lower corner, and I'm always typing in it. And this thing comes right out of nowhere. I'm like, come on. So
it is strange that they don't let you customize that, because they finally added the ability to move the volume indicator from the bottom middle to the top left and top center. But the fact that you can't move the note where the notifications pop is insane. That even now, because not even Windows 10 had that option, I don't think. That's genuinely insane. So yeah, that's a great one, Dan. It's absolutely, I agree that should be an option, because I would like it to come up in the top right. That should be where it comes up, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
It just kind of makes sense. As to, like, I don't even know why that isn't the default, outside of besides that, like, well, that's the way Apple did it, and they didn't want to look like Apple, I guess.
I want to say it was that on Windows 8 and they changed it for Windows 10. I could be wrong about that. I'm pretty sure Windows 8 had notifications in the top right. But I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, possibly.
Right, last big announcement Microsoft made about Windows at Ignite is a new version of BitLocker, which will only function on new PCs launching next year. So I'm assuming this is tied to things like Snapdragon X2 and maybe NVIDIA's upcoming N1X based chips, and also maybe the next gen Intel and AMD chips as well. But they've announced a feature called Hardware Accelerated BitLocker, which brings faster and more secure disk encryption to Windows by leveraging modern SoCs and CPUs. Cryptography operations are now offloaded from the main processor to dedicated hardware, boosting performance and reducing system overhead. On supported hardware, encryption keys are now hardware protected by being wrapped and isolated at the silicon level, which helps minimize exposure to CPU and memory vulnerabilities and raises the bar for data protection. So not much more was shared about this. We'll likely know more next year when these devices start shipping with this hardware accelerated BitLocker enabled. We don't know how much faster it is at encrypting, and we also don't know how much more secure it is at keeping that encryption key secure. But it is a new version of BitLocker, and it does sound like it's more secure than the current one, which is, I guess, good news. So I think that's basically the rundown of all the Windows news at Ignite. I believe Microsoft also said Windows 11 is now in use by almost 1 billion users. They didn't give an exact number, but almost could be doing a lot of heavy lifting. That could be anywhere between 600 million and 1 billion. But Windows 11 still is slowly gaining market share as Windows 11 dies off, which is to be expected. That's basically all the Windows news. Now we can talk about Valve. Dan, do you want to take this the start of this?
Yeah, sure. So this has been rumored for a while, but yeah, Valve announced the Steam Machine, which is coming in spring 2026. Price unknown. Probably won't be cheap. It won't be $500, but hopefully it'll be less than 1,000. I don't know. Some of us were thinking $699, $799 without a controller, but we'll have to see. They also announced, of course, a headset, which is like whatever, although it's standalone and runs Qualcomm, which is kind of interesting. And then they also have a new controller, which looks terrible. But I mean, in terms of, well, its design is weird, but I'm not gonna, it could be super comfortable. I don't know. Microsoft is famous for its ergonomics, for being pretty spot on with it. So I'll give this one a fair shake. And it has two touchpads on it, which makes navigation easy for PC type games. But the thing we're talking about is, of course, the Steam Machine. Now, this is not the first time Valve has done this. They did Steam Machines many years ago. I believe they ran Android, and then a bunch of companies released them, and it went nowhere, and it crashed. And that was it. So they brought back, it's almost 10 years to the day that they announced this. So this is a brand new one. For all intents and purposes, this is a mini PC.
Yes.
Although it does have custom AMD hardware in it, especially around the GPU and the CPU and the shared memory and all this kind of stuff, which is kind of, or rather, there's discrete memory, which is unusual for AMD GPUs. But it looks like it's a black cube, or as others noted, it looks like you took a Series X Xbox and squished it down. But yeah, so it's a black cube, got a couple of outputs. And yeah, you connect this thing up to your TV, and with a new controller, you can play your entire Steam library on your TV. Now, you could have already done this if you had a PC connected to your TV. You could have done it. You could, of course, use your Steam Deck and dock it and make those docks. You just drop it in there, just like a Wii. So the difference between that, at least in the Steam Deck, this is going to be 6 times as powerful as a Steam Deck. So you're going to be able to do 4K 60 frames per second gaming on it. Now, that's with upscaling, right? That's not just raw, but still, that's the kind of performance a lot of people are expecting from the high-end games, right? And it's a impressive package. And we've been divided on the Windows Central team about this because, well, Jez obviously is Team Xbox. Zach is also Xbox, but becoming, I would say, more jaded. I don't really have anything against Xbox by having used one now about 2 years. But that's mostly because I kind of stopped gaming. Although I'm trying and picking up again, and I use the Steam Deck though for it. And I've mentioned how with the gaming handhelds, soon as the Steam OS came out for other handhelds, I removed Windows and put that on there and been happy ever since. I think the big thing here is, like, if you have a lot of Steam games, this is like an easy sell for a lot of people. And I have like just under 200 games or something like that. So I have quite a bit. If you're on a console for Xbox, it's probably a little bit different. Now, granted, Steam doesn't have like Fortnite and some of the bigger games with anti-cheat and all that, Call of Duty. I think, Zach, you and I were like, that's why we want it. It's like, yeah, we don't care about that stuff, right? Like I'm, and I think this is really kind of the big thing right now, is that Valve as a company has way more respect and likability from its customer base than I would say Microsoft right now has through Xbox and its fan base. And people just like Steam. And I get it, because I'm one of those people. I just like Steam. I find their store too busy. I have to half the time use Control F to find something. But I still just like their store. I like how they have indie games. I like they have the sales. I like they have codes, like all that stuff. They all really popularized that stuff. So I think this thing is pretty awesome. Of course, a lot of it's going to be contingent upon the price. Now, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the future of Xbox. And basically, we said and thought the same thing, that Xbox was going to go down this route as well, that they're going to be basically making a PC, and it's going to run like a version of Windows/Xbox, and it's going to run PC games of some sort. And this would actually benefit Microsoft in the sense that PC gaming is so massive and huge that they can just sort of erase that line between console and PC. Then the gates are open and they, kind of dominate that market, something that Sony doesn't quite have access to. And this is especially true if they open up an Xbox to other OEMs to create different price points and be more competitive, right? So the Microsoft version might come out, like $700. People are like, oh, it's too expensive. But then maybe HP comes out with a $500 version. It doesn't have as many features. Maybe it's not as fast. And then Razer will, of course, come out with a $1,500 version that, has RGB and glows and does all sorts of cool stuff. So like that is like really interesting because that also addresses then the complaints people have when Microsoft makes a console, which there were a lot of complaints on Series X and Series S, like the expandable memory and stuff. But I should point out that we're expecting the same thing with Steam Machine. That is third-party companies, HP, Dell, Lenovo, all of them should be able to make Steam machines. In fact, you should be able to just have a mini PC and be able to load up Steam OS on it and get the same experience yourself. So I think that's a kind of a big change here for all this stuff. The difference, of course, also is Valve is going to be probably at least a year ahead of Microsoft. Now, I think that'll buy them some market, but I don't know if it'll displace Microsoft. And Jez Corden, our games editor, of course, would say, well, Microsoft owns all the publishers. And that's kind of where they're really making their money these days because everyone buys their games, and the platform itself technically doesn't matter. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? Like, I just like PC gaming and Steam. Like, my favorite thing is the fact that, yeah, I can play the game on my Steam Deck. But now, and we'll talk about it after this with the Qualcomm stuff and gaming on there, I can just then go onto my Windows laptop, install Steam, download some of my games and start playing on that. And there's no limit, right? I can install this on main PCs as I want to and still have fun with it. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think this is probably the biggest threat to Windows PC gaming yet. I think, people laugh for a long time that, this is the year of the Linux gaming PC. That has never really come to fruition. But I think Steam, what Valve is doing with the Steam Machine and Steam Deck and now Steam OS becoming an ecosystem, a platform that other OEMs can use more openly, I think that this is the biggest threat to Windows PC gaming that Microsoft has had to face yet. And I say that because it does feel like a lot of Windows PC gamers are kind of tired of Windows 11 or Windows in general. They kind of want off of the platform. If there is an alternative that comes along that does gaming better than Windows, then they're going to take it. Now, SteamOS isn't there yet. There are still some issues in regards to compatibility. Proton does a great job at making a lot of Windows games run on SteamOS, but it isn't bulletproof, and things like anti-cheat are still a problem. So that's why things like as Dan mentioned, Call of Duty and Fortnite don't work properly, or if at all, on SteamOS. But I will say that that's only an issue for as long as SteamOS isn't being taken seriously by the market. As soon as SteamOS gains traction and is eating into Windows's gaming market share, I wouldn't be surprised to see game developers start taking SteamOS seriously and building support for it. Whether that be SteamOS's own version of anti-cheat or if game developers have to build their own anti-cheat into their games, who knows? But I think that will happen if SteamOS takes off, and I think it could. I think it really seriously could. And it is funny how, the big rumor is the next Xbox is supposed to basically be this hybrid mini PC console thing. And Valve just did it. They're like, "Hell, we'll do it for them. Here you go. It's running SteamOS. That's what the Xbox will look like, but running Windows, which is kind of worse at gaming when it comes to performance." So, that's a big middle finger to Microsoft. And now I'm really interested to see what the next Xbox is going to look like, because as we've discussed on this podcast, a lot of work needs to be done to Windows to make it a viable console operating system. They've laid the groundworks with the handhelds, yes. But it's not enough. There's still so many issues with Windows currently that need to be addressed before an Xbox console running Windows is viable. Things like the OS image being bloated with things like Notepad and Copilot and Paint. Those things don't need to be installed by default on an Xbox. And they're not on the current Xbox, so why the next-gen Xbox would have those installed by default, I don't know. There should be a lean, streamlined version of Windows PC that can run Steam and can run Epic Games, but also doesn't come with all the bloat that Windows comes with today. It shouldn't come with the widgets board. It shouldn't come with Windows Studio effects and recall. It doesn't need any of that. It's a gaming PC. And so, you don't get me wrong, you should be able to go in and download all that stuff if you want. That's the beauty of a PC, but it shouldn't be in the image by default. Ideally, for the next Xbox to be good as an Xbox, you shouldn't know it's running Windows until you want to run Windows on it, until you want to switch out of the dedicated console mode into the desktop environment. That's when it should become obvious that you're running Windows. everywhere else, it should just be Xbox. It should be an Xbox dashboard, an Xbox controller interface. Apps should run in full screen. You shouldn't ever see a desktop interface unless you ask to see it. Because that's how SteamOS works. You don't ever go into the desktop environment in SteamOS unless you get out of big picture mode. It will have to be the same on Windows. So yeah, I'm really interested. I think this is going to light a fire under Microsoft and Xbox. They can't just sort of stumble into this and just sort of what's the word? Dilly-dally, I guess. They have to, pick up the pace. The industry is moving. Valve is coming from Microsoft here. Windows needs to respond, and they need to do it soon. I think next year, if Microsoft doesn't start talking about its vision for gaming on Windows next year, then I think we're in trouble. I think Microsoft needs to have something to show off next year. Even if it's not available next year, they need to start talking about it next year.
We should also point out, I guess two things. One, that Xbox full screen experience that's found on the Ally and Ally X shouldn't be a surprise. Someone created a tool at GitHub called it's all one word, but it's called this Xbox full screen experience tool. So if you type that in, or you go to Windows Central, the article's on our front page in our carousel, you can download this little tool. It's a little app, and you run it, and you can enable this mode. So it's going to reboot your PC, of course, because that's how it works. And as it's booting, it jettisons stuff that it doesn't need for the full screen mode, which is where you get roughly 2 gigs of RAM back. But then you get this full page experience, and you can then enjoy your games. Again, that's kind of cool because you can then take a mini PC with Windows on it and do this, and you just made your own kind of little Xbox. Someone points out in comments, and I haven't heard this, today they announced Xbox Full Experience will come to Windows Insider. Have you heard this, Zach?
They did start previewing it on one of the handhelds a couple of weeks back. I can't remember. I think the MSI Claw, I think it's called, or something like that.
But that's with the screen limits. That's the difference for people who don't know, right? So that will come officially, but you can only run it on devices with like a certain screen size.
Yeah, the official full screen experience only runs on devices under 10 inches, I think. So Microsoft has said any Windows-based handheld will get this experience. So yeah, it's just, I think, slowly rolling out to them.
Yeah. So this is cool though with this little tool, and it being on GitHub means the code is all there. So there should be no security risk. And it's not like it's doing much anyway. So I think it runs a single command and it just does this thing for you. But yeah, I mean, so you can kind of go and create your own mini Xbox for your TV if you want to do that right now and play PC games on it or your Xbox games. So that's an option. And of course, if you have a Windows laptop, especially a gaming laptop, you could run this thing, reboots the computer, and you go into this special Xbox mode, play all your games, and get a lot, more performance out of it, simpler experience, probably way more stable as well. And when you're done, you exit out and it goes back to normal. So kind of a cool thing, though, if people want to do that. I think it's a great option. Not surprising that people kind of hacked it, but there you go. So that's just, again, on GitHub.
Just to follow up, it turns out actually the comments are right. Microsoft did announce today that the full screen experience is coming soon to PC in the Windows Insider program.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it's just a matter of time because it's not like this was a sophisticated hack, right?
No, yeah.
This was more about someone created a tool to run the bash command for you, which is fine because I don't like open a console and type in commands. But so it's just a UI and it allows you to just hit a button basically. So yeah, so it sounds like Microsoft's just said, all right, fine, we'll just allow this to go to any other Windows device, which is kind of huge actually.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that people have really asked for, and I think gamers will really appreciate. So kudos to Microsoft for doing that. It's not the super light OS that a lot of us want, but this goes a long way, in my opinion, of making that happen. And they can continue to tweak and evolve it as it goes on. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's move on to the final stuff, which is Qualcomm. Speaking of more gaming, so they had 2 announcements. One, the Snapdragon control panel is finally here. This was announced a year ago, more than a year ago. In fact, when they first kind of announced Snapdragon X Elite, I think it was, they said that they're going to come out with a control panel and you're going to be able to download drivers for the GPU. They're going to have a regular cadence of updates for the GPU, which would help increase game compatibility, sort of like NVIDIA drivers, how they do this every month. NVIDIA has a big announcement and new drivers come out and they show all the new games it works with and all that. So they're going to be kind of doing the same thing with their GPU. This allows that. This also allows other settings to be enabled. It can automatically detect games and modify settings to optimize quality and performance, optimize game settings and keep drivers up to date, experience better performance and support for more games with downloadable graphics, drivers, and AVX2 emulation. Play Fortnite. Play Fortnite and enjoy improved anti-cheat compatibility on Snapdragon X series. So we also did hear about this. This was an issue. The anti-cheat stuff, kernel level, was a problem for ARM devices, so a lot of the big games couldn't run on it. That's being addressed. You can now do Fortnite, and Qualcomm has announced that they worked with developers to provide kernel level anti-cheat support for Windows on Snapdragon, and they're also working with the following anti-cheat providers for an anti-cheat in other games. Tencent's anti-cheat expert, Ace, Roblox Hyperion, Denuvo, Protect Game Guard, BattleEye, and Uncheater. I don't follow that stuff too much, but that sounds like most of them. I've heard of Denuvo definitely before. So that solves a lot of the gaming issues on these devices, and it's going to just continue to get better from there. The other announcement was regarding the Snapdragon X2 series of laptops, which we expect to start shipping in early spring. And we'll probably see a lot of this stuff announced at CES at the very beginning of January. I think it's January 4th or 5th. I'll be there in Las Vegas, as usual, to cover it. But we do expect to hear a lot of announcements around this stuff. So the X2, we know, especially the X2 Elite, gets a big jump in performance. It's 2.3x faster for gaming performance than the current chipset. So it's a pretty big jump. But they announced that they claim 90% of the top Windows games will run on Snapdragon X2 basically on day one. And that 90% we've heard before. The 90% was also the same number given to the amount of apps that Qualcomm, which are native now with ARM coding in them, is over 90% or about 90%. I think this is pretty huge, right? So between the fact that their chips have always been very capable of gaming, like their GPUs are powerful and all this kind of stuff, but the drivers were lacking and these optimizations and AVX2 support and of course the anti-cheat stuff. And now they're getting that stuff done. And they couldn't have done that years ago, right? So this is a lot of progress. Sure, it's only 90% of the games out there, but that's a lot of games too, right? I mean, there are a lot of Windows games out there on the market. So 90% is not trivial. And if they can do over 90% of their apps are native ARM. We're not talking about running on ARM. That's a separate thing where it's probably more like 99%. But that these apps have been all updated to have ARM code in them for optimizations is at 90% too. This is all like huge momentum. And the X2, I expect to be a really phenomenal chip. I mean, I said before, we've talked about this. I'm actually still just happy with the X Elite. Like, I don't use my X Elite laptops, or I even use the X Plus laptops. I don't run that and be like, oh, this thing's getting sluggish. It's slow. I wish I had more power. I mean, I'll take it, but I don't feel for the first time like I really need more, including battery life. The battery life is fantastic on these devices. So I don't know. What do you think about all these announcements? I think it's kind of cool stuff.
I think it's great. I mean, we've known from the beginning that Qualcomm wanted to jump into gaming on Windows, and I think with the first gen chips, they made the mistake of really hyping up gaming only for people to be disappointed with the actual end products because there were so many incompatibilities slash just a lot of just weird texture glitches in a lot of games, and I think it all fell a little bit flat. But I think with X2, they were a lot more confident. And it seems that there's been a lot of work done on the software side, the driver side, to make sure that this stuff works better on Windows and ARM. Things like Fortnite being compatible now is a great step forward with the things like anti-cheat compatibility. And, you know, it's really interestingly timed as well, because as we just talked about, Valve announced their own VR headset, which is running a Snapdragon chip, but it runs SteamOS and it will run SteamOS games, and that is the first ARM-based SteamOS device on the market, or will be. And so clearly Qualcomm is getting into PC gaming. That's what's happening here. And so, you know, will it be to a level where we're able to compete with discrete graphics from Nvidia and AMD? Probably not yet, but time might change that. And with X3 and maybe X4, maybe the integrated GPU will be good enough.
You know what though? So like kind of what changes a lot of this is the upscaling and super scaling and all that kind of stuff. Like that really changes how all this stuff, like we look at it as far as competing with each other, because I feel like you're going to be able to do some pretty serious gaming with these chips because of these AI technologies and upscaling and all this kind of stuff, where it kind of like, why then you start asking, why do I need an NVIDIA GPU, like, which sucks all this power out and everything. And plus you could have a thin and light laptop, do the same thing. So
yeah, I think it's all great news for the PC gaming industry as a whole.
You should point out too, Intel's no slouch. I've heard pretty significant things regarding new chips from them, what would be the Core Ultra 3 series. I heard the GPU is up there, entry-level GPU with NVIDIA. In fact, I know of some news where one OEM company is pretty confident that they're not using NVIDIA on a certain laptop because of it. So I think Intel is going to be a big competitor here too. As big as a fan I am of Qualcomm and ARM stuff, I will say I think Intel has quite a bit of fight in them. I think these new chips are going to be a pretty big deal. Interestingly, 50 top CPU for Intel, but Qualcomm then goes to 80, which is just like so crazy. It's just like, we're just going to basically double our tops, like, and everybody of course is like, well, what do you need all that for? And that's just it. They're building it for future use, that that capacity is there, where Intel is going to be able to go, hey, for the first time, all our CPUs for laptops finally have an NPU on them, and they're not bad. They're like 50, So, but I still think Intel is going to be really powerful and competitive in battery life. I think it's going to be I think ARM will still have the advantage here, just because of its architecture. But there's been a lot of debate about this. A lot of people say that there's nothing inherent about RISC chips in like ARM and all this kind of stuff, like that one is necessarily more efficient than the other. It really has to do with the architecture and how they're designed and everything. And we still have to remember that, this has been a long road, but these chips for x86 all started off from desktop. That's where they came from. So it took a long time for desktop chips to come into laptops to optimize for battery life in those, right? I mean, I remember when speed step technology came out with Intel. It's the first time they could actually be like, they're running at 3 gigahertz all the time. You could just drop down to like 0.100 hertz and scale up, and that changed over the years and has improved. So I think Intel's going to be still a big deal here. But I think with the Qualcomm stuff, we know that they're involved with handhelds because they make gaming handhelds running Android. And it's just a matter of time before I think they do a handheld Windows device, which would be super interesting because you get the compatibility solved, which they're doing. The anti-cheat stuff is solved. You go get the power and efficiency. You got this control panel. You have, of course, the upscaling technologies in there and AI assistance and everything. It's just like they could actually make a pretty awesome handheld, which is, I would say, we still need with the AMD Intel stuff going on with those handhelds right now, because they're good. They can give you this performance, but the battery life is still like, we're back to where laptops were a couple of years ago. It's like, I can maybe get 4 hours out of it, maybe 5 hours if I do like a simple game and turn everything off, but it's only gonna be like an hour and a half if I'm playing a AAA game. So we gotta this may be another space for Qualcomm to get into, which would be kind of ironic. For them to kind of get into gaming and sort of dominate in that space. But I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens. So, any final thoughts?
No, I just think it's looking up for Qualcomm. I think they've done such a great job with the first gen X Elite and X series of chips. Even the base model Snapdragon X is great. Like I never have any complaints even using that. So for there to be an X2 which is this much more powerful and now also capable of most gaming on Windows, it's just like it's the dream come true. Could you imagine 5 years ago saying, "Oh, by the way, Windows on ARM is going to be capable of playing most PC games soon"? What are you talking about? Absolutely not. It's just so crazy how Windows on ARM has turned itself around so significantly in the last 12 to 18 months.
And speaking of, and I'm going to just drop this link into the chat, but you can go to our front page and it's in our carousel. Our favorite ARM laptop, at least affordable one, because Zach and I are still Surface Laptop 7, Surface Pro 11 fanboys. They're still I use a laptop 7 every single night. I just love that thing. But my second runner-up, if you're on a budget, is the Asus ZenBook A14, and it's still. I've said this. Zachary, our other reviewer, has said this, and other people on our team who have tried this laptop. I'll say the same thing. It's the best thing. It's on sale right now for $550 at I believe that Best Buy. It's normally $1,000. $550. And the specs on it are no slouch. It's a 14-inch OLED display. I forgot the refresh rate on it. It might be just 60. It's super light. It's only just over 2 pounds. It has this awesome special coating that they use on it, the materials that they use. And it runs with a Snapdragon X Plus processor. And it's the full specs on it. I forgot if it was 16 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of RAM. Yeah, 16 gigs of RAM. 14-inch 2K OLED, 16 gigs memory, 512 storage. Of course, you can upgrade that yourself if you want to. This laptop is just so fun to use. It got an awesome keyboard. The display is great on it, and the battery life is just bonkers. It just lasts like a really long time. I'm talking at least 10 hours because I was stuck at an airport. This is all I had, and it was just like it was cool because the first time I did have a charger tucked away if I needed it, but I never once felt like I needed to get that charger out at all. I could just sit for hours. I'm like, I don't care if it's delayed. I'll just hang out in the Delta Lounge and use this thing all day, and it just would not die. So $550, the ZenBook A14. I can't endorse it enough. I know there'll be new Snapdragon chips coming out next year, but that's still 6 months away. Until then, get this thing at $550 if you just need a really good Ultrabook. So there we go. We'll do some Q&A with the audience right now. If there are any questions, otherwise, we'll hopefully be back next Thursday at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, where we'll cover Microsoft and other Windows news that's happening there, and some feedback from you guys as always is appreciated. So you can follow us on Twitter, and I'm Daniel_Rubino. Zach is Zac Bowden at ZACBOWDEN. But as always, we appreciate you guys tuning in. So take care.
Awesome. Stop the thing here as well. Yep. So yeah, if there's any questions and you want to put them in the chat, do that now, because we'll hang around and do our best to answer them. And people still talk about Windows and ARM like it's 2017. Yeah, I really hate that people still hang on to this. You'll see some YouTubers do it. They'll say things like, "Oh, there's app compatibility problems," and it's like, where?
Yeah, where?
Show me the app that has an app compatibility.
I found this one app from 1997.
Yeah,
it's just like,
okay, sure.
Yeah, that is super frustrating.
Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are some apps that still don't work, but most of them do, and for most buyers, it's a non-issue. That's the bit they don't mention.
Yeah, I mean, I should point out it's that laptop has a 4.6 rating on Best Buy from 245 reviews. We're not joking. We're not being chills here. It's a good laptop. It's rare to see a Windows laptop with a 4.6 on Best Buy. I'm going to say that.
Yeah.
But people are really happy with this thing, as they should. It's such a good. We all love it here. It's just like, I don't know. But I have a 50th anniversary Surface Laptop 7, so that's my. I can't stop using that thing. It's just
the Laptop 7 is still my favorite laptop.
Yeah. If only it had an anti-reflective display.
And 5G, which it does now have, but you have to buy it.
Yeah.
And it's Intel only, sadly.
Right.
Are there any questions? Last call for questions. If there are no questions, we will head off.
Yeah, what's up with the Surface Laptop Go line?
Laptop Go has been replaced by the 13-inch laptop, as far as I'm aware.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the new Laptop Go.
Interesting.
You can see it, like it shares similarities, like the fingerprint reader and the
What about the Surface Go?
Surface Go is apparently still a thing, but it's now very much an enterprise product, so they'll only update it whenever enterprises want a new one. So
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, they did plan an ARM Surface Go with Snapdragon X, but it never came to fruition. Probably because enterprises were like, "Nah, don't want it." So yeah, that was scrapped.
That would be so cool. Although I don't know, my eyes are starting to fail me, so it's a little tiny baby laptop.
Out of the cancelled operating systems over the 40 years, there are many. Which ones, if any, would you feel like would have liked to seen be released to the general public, and why? Windows 10X is obviously the big obvious one there. 10X was showing so much promise. It was built on this new lightweight version of Windows. It was modern, it was secure, it was fast, it was lean. Oh, it would have been so great. I daily drove Windows 10X on my Surface Pro 6 back in 2020. I had access to it before it actually leaked, and so I was daily driving it for a while, and it was great. I loved my entire time using Windows 10X, and given had UWP stuck around, I think it would have been even better. But even if it hadn't, and it just evolved into becoming this sort of web-based web app OS, I still think it would have been great. It was so fluid. Even now, if you like manipulate 10X and you manipulate Windows 11 side by side, 10X feels smoother. There's something about that Windows interface that Windows 11 is missing in regards to fluidity and performance, and just how everything's so instantly responsive when you tap it or use the cursor on it, versus Windows 11, where there's just something about the animations that aren't as fluid. I don't know I couldn't explain the difference, but I can feel the difference. And yeah, 10X not launching, I think, will be the moment. If Windows isn't around in the next 40 years, 10X is the moment where that sealed the fate. The fact that 10X didn't get off the ground and didn't set the narrative for the next 40 years of Windows is the reason why. Yes. So yeah, any more questions? Please do put them in the chat. I kind of like Microsoft not releasing new services every year because it means I save a lot of money. It was always a problem when Microsoft, they used to do 2 service events a year. Do you remember? They used to do one in the spring, and then they do a follow-up in the fall, and the fall one was usually where all the new stuff was, and then the spring was usually where all the refreshes were. So I was buying new services every 6 months. Don't have to do that anymore, so that's very nice. The difference is the XAML composer owning the root UI tree. Probably, yeah. Whatever magic Microsoft was working on 10X is not present on Windows 11. All right. It looks like we're just about done for questions. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We should be back. Oh, we probably won't be back next week because it's Thanksgiving, isn't it, Dan?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
so we won't be back next Thursday.
No, but we should be back the week after. And we'll probably do 1 or 2 more episodes this year before 2026 rolls around. But yeah, follow us on the socials. We'll keep you updated when we go live. But until then, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.